Well, hello again, and welcome to our Fireside chat session. Really an off-the-record conversation with Mike Shaffer, EVP, COO, and CFO of PVH Corp. And before we start off, a little bit of background on Mike. So Mike has been with PVH for over 25 years, and he has played an instrumental role really in shaping the strategic direction of the company. And that included, for instance, some large-scale acquisitions such as Tommy Hilfiger in 2010 or Warnaco in 2013. Mike is also playing a key role in the digital transformation of the company, and that includes omni-channel capabilities or planning tools for the supply chain. And last but not least, he's also committed to leading change through PVH's commitment to corporate responsibility. So today's discussion on innovation and sustainability really is a subject very dear to him. So welcome, Mike. Really delighted to have you here today.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. So, of course, we'd love to learn more about sustainability and innovation at PVH, but I'm also really keen to hear your perspectives on the macro trends in the industry. So kicking us off, and I know you're off the earnings call just now.
I can talk.
Earnings call, but I'd love to hear from you how sustainability and innovation really plays into PVH's go-forward strategy, particularly in the light of the challenges that 2020 poses.
Yeah, look, I would say I think we had a great quarter. So I'll start with that. Q3 for PVH was very strong. International businesses really outperformed. We actually made more money and had a higher profit level this year versus last year in our international businesses, really fueled by Europe and China in particular. North America is difficult for us. It is being heavily impacted by a lack of tourists and tourism. About 40% of our outlet business, which is about half of our business in North America, is driven by tourists. So half of the business is outlets, and about 35 to 40% of that is driven by tourists, and that is almost down to zero. So there is no one coming here, no one shopping at the outlets, no one going to Disney World and all the great places. So it's problematic for us, and we are feeling that in North America. What's changed for us this year has been a focus on cash and liquidity. So we often talk about the fact that what we have in cash on hand and our borrowing base. And because the world has become so unstable, so erratic, it's instead of talking about earnings as much as we always have, we also focus on liquidity for us, which has been very strong. So coming off of a great quarter. I guess what I see in the macro trends and how it's affected our CR and our commitments, I'm amazed, and we've had lots of discussion why. I don't know if I can tell you why, but I'm amazed at the acceleration the pandemic has created around the area of sustainability. In virtually every aspect, Esther just talked about the recycling initiatives. My teams are focused on more and more about packaging and recycling. It's just amazing how the pandemic has moved those initiatives forward faster. And we are trying to adjust and move forward faster with what I think for the first time is a consumer demand in the space for products that now will be more sustainable and more in line with sustainability.
That's interesting to hear, and congrats to the earnings call in those times.
Thank you.
You referred already to a couple of examples, but I'm curious to hear what you, with your perspective, finance and operational perspective, what you see as the greatest opportunities and barriers to sustainable and circular fashion.
So I guess they go together. I think when you talk about barriers and opportunities, I think everything has a cost, everything has a return. We are a public company, and even if you're not a public company, most companies exist to earn profits and get returns on their investments. And to date, I think the cost of much of what we can do on the sustainability side has been hefty. I think getting to scale, getting products to a level or the ability to create products that are more circular in nature, using recycled materials, using recycled packaging. I think getting scalability in this space is key to us getting costs down. Our business is very different by region. Our price points are very different by region. Asia tends to be higher priced than Europe, and Europe is higher priced than North America. When you come to North America, there's this huge base of business called, we call mass. And I think that business is the bulk of the business. My instincts are it's 70 to 80% of the North America market. And I think that's a big piece of the European market as well, less so in Asia. But I think when you have product that is lower in price point, moderate in nature, and you try to be more sustainable around it, it's very difficult today. The costs of being more sustainable make it harder. Now, you don't compromise your standards. We don't allow ourselves to not be in the right factories, treat people the right way, treat the environment the right way, but costs are an issue. And now adding in more circular products that are circular elements to products, over time, I absolutely believe we will get there, but the pressure on costs and making it affordable for the consumer in each market is difficult.
Mm. And when you reflect in this context of the innovation and PVH's journey towards innovation, how would you characterize that?
It's been something that we focus on, something we've been trying to move forward on. We've been doing rifle shots. We've been trying to take very small bites of things that really matter, things that we can really sink our teeth into. We're trying to not be very focused on what we're doing, and not do 25, 35 different things, but instead have 4, 5, or 10 innovative topics.
Yeah. It clearly is a journey, the innovation.
It is a journey, that is for sure.
Thank you for that. Let's take a bit of an industry perspective. What is most exciting to you as you see now the industry moving into its next chapter?
So I don't know if I'm the only one, but one of the things that keeps me up at night, one of the things that always makes me worried is I think we will be moving, we are moving. Reselling, refurbishment, circular product. I think it's exciting, and at the same time really scary. It's going to be a complete upheaval to this model of make and sell. And it's not just at the corporate side for PVH or for players in this apparel sector. It's going to flow all the ways back to the fields, the cotton pickers, the spinners, the dye manufacturers. If there's less, and we all know it's good, so I'm not at all saying it's not the right thing, but the whole model of buy and sell is going to just be different. And I'm not smart enough to figure out how it's going to change. I've been poo-pooing the resale market for the last 4 years, and I'm just wrong. It's absolutely gaining traction. It is becoming more important. More and more of our shoppers, our consumers are willing to buy resale, which means they're not buying something new, which means we're not making the shirt, we're not spinning the yarns, we're not buying the dyes, we're not putting it on a boat, which is keeping people employed in the shipping industry. So there's a model change coming, and I'm excited for it, fearful of it, and looking forward to seeing how it evolves and trying to stay ahead of it. But it is one of my concerns.
Yeah. And I think you're on the forefront, at least with regards to ReCommerce, with what Esther just shared in the collaboration with the renewal workshop. And I should point out that even on the digital acceleration side, on the digital side, PVH is, in a strong front runner role. We had in our June event, Anne-Christine Poulet, sharing what Hatch and Stitch is doing, even setting that up in a startup type of way is truly impressive. So.
Yeah, our teams have been, I think our teams, both in Europe and North America and Asia, have really recognized early on that the concept of circularity doesn't start with the finished product. It starts with the design phase. And we put a lot of resources behind getting to a place where we can design and sell product without the samples, without making the product, truly being digital and getting to an end-to-end and creating a product that could be circular in nature. So teams have done a great job.
My next question is a difficult one. At least, we're thinking a lot about that. PVH is obviously a publicly listed company. You're just coming off the earnings call. And I'd love to get your thoughts on the investor ecosystem. And we've briefly spoke about that before. Larry Fink from BlackRock, he has been very vocal about the asset manager's position on climate change and the environment, social and governance, so ESG related topics when making investment decisions. So the question is whether this voice of Larry actually trickles through and whether the investment community really takes this stakeholder approach into consideration. So I'm curious to hear your perspective, specifically if it relates to investments in innovation and R&D in topics that have a longer payback cycle where the return is not that immediate, when maybe 10 to 15 years need to be considered. Big question, but I'm curious.
No, it's a great question. So I think I'm going to be a bit of a downer to everybody. I would say that on the investor side, we meet with investors in Europe, in North America, and occasionally Asia. I would say that the focus on CR, the focus on sustainability is very minimal in North America, in the USA particularly. It's just almost non-existent. I do believe it's evolving. Maybe there's been a tick up in the amount of questions we get, but I mean, I just had a call today. There was nothing on our future plans. We did call it out. Having a CEO who believes in it, both Manny and the future CEO, Stefan, it's absolutely been called out. We're continuing down the path, but I don't feel it's being driven by a North America investor base. As it relates to Europe, it's very different. Most meetings have a discussion on where we are, what are our thoughts on CR, how are we moving forward, are we making investments, and what those investments are. I believe the investors in Europe have a longer-term horizon, so it sort of plays to where you were going, which is, are we willing to make those investments? So it's very different, and I would say there's not much of a focus on CR in Asia. It's more in line with North America. So I do believe it's changing, but today it's not a focal point. And while it is more prevalent in Europe, I would say it's 10% of the discussion, not 90% of the discussion, or even 50% or 20%. It's a small piece, but it is in every meeting, or almost every meeting. Our investment strategy has been always to get a return on our investments, but we are willing to make investments that do make sense, that do the right thing, that follow our corporate principles, and if they even have a longer payback. So we have made investments where we don't necessarily see payback. We've made investments where we won't get payback, but we do feel good about what we've done. We feel there is a payback, maybe down the road for doing the right thing, maybe for the environment. Solar panels, I can't justify, but we have them in Europe, we have them in North America. They don't pay back. So there are investments we'll make, and we do take a less prudent stance, on if there is an environmental concern, a human rights concern, obviously, but we will pare back some of our return principles to do the right thing.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing. So PVH has been with Fashion for Good now for more than 3 years, and your teams, I think, have met hundreds of innovators and worked through lots of landscape discussions. And there's also quite a range of pilots that you're engaged with. Which ones are your highlights? Which are the ones that you would, present and point out?
Yeah, the one I guess so in front of us now, another pandemic acceleration has been e-commerce. So our digital business is just, we talked today, our owned and operated business is up about 70% for the third quarter and about 35–40% for the total with third parties. So the amount of digital business we're doing is off the charts. We've started on a focus of packaging. We started looking at our packaging, and I would say the industry, not PVH, but the industry could do a much better job in how we package and ship our products to consumers through the e-commerce side. It's not been a focal point, and some of the biggest players are also some of the biggest, have the biggest violations or the most waste. With Fashion for Good, we took a hard look at poly bags, which is not just an e-commerce predicament. It's really almost every piece of apparel we bring in. We call them package shirts. We call even our t-shirts often come in packaging. The poly bags are just horrible and create an environmental problem. There's 10 to 15% of those poly bags are recycled. Fashion for Good was really helpful, partnered us up with a great partner who, with other players in the Fashion for Good eco-cycle, other apparel companies, we ran a pilot test, and we were successful at not a huge scale, but we are successful. There is a process to create new poly bags from old, take out the dyes, take out the adhesives, and make them work. So I just find it something that's going to permeate the industry, from the poly bags that could permeate the industry. I think it's called to action. I think we have to focus on it as an industry. I think it has to be a push. I think it has to be the big manufacturers, the people that I use, PVH uses, and the other big players have to be pushed to start recycling those. And I do think it will also impact the e-commerce side, where we're wasteful and use a lot of plastics as well. So I'd say that was one of my favorites. The other one that it's just near and dear to PVH, Esther talked about it in brief as well, was the idea of circular product, being able to break product down, chemically recycling product to a base fiber and being able to reuse it is also not scalable yet, but so exciting and scary. As I said before, I do think there's a whole model shift of what happens if you're not buying new fabrics, new yarns, and it flows across the globe. But those are two of my favorites.
And there's a third one that you're also participating, which is the chemical recycling cellulosics project. All of three of those are consortia type setups, where like multiple brands and in some cases even multiple innovators are coming together.
Yeah, you guys have been extremely helpful, and my teams have done an amazing job of partnering up with some of the big players to move these initiatives forward. I think it's going to be now the industry's job to try to move it forward, to get it scalable, to get the cost down, to get the amount of recycled fabrics, the recycled poly bags, and really push to get this to a scalable level that we can make impact.
And is from your finance perspective, one of the ideas next to just collaboration and sharing learnings is also to, in such a consortia type setup, to share the risk and hopefully eventually also come up with, identify the winners and eventually then back the winners with some, signal of demand, be it offtake agreements. Is that something that you feel is appropriate to maybe, also deal with the challenges that investor perspectives are maybe often more short-term focused and longer-term R&D is a bit more challenging?
Yeah, look, we love the concept of the sharing of the risk. So it makes great sense on the tech innovation side. We actually are part of a fund where we invested with other big players, global players, to bring technologies to light that made sense. So the idea of being in a shared pool to share that risk and the reward, and get big players behind new technology, both on the tech side, true tech side, but also on the CR side as it relates to sustainability, poly bags, or anything in that area seems very, very smart to me. It's always better to share. I'd much rather have a smaller piece of a win than a larger piece of a loss. So I think it would make great sense to us to be partners to that.
That's good to hear. I also want to provide the opportunity for the audience to ask questions. Just checking here in the chat. Are there any questions from the audience? And please, you can chime in. Not yet, okay. Well, what is the most exciting piece for 2020, or maybe, you know, the biggest challenge that you think is ahead for 2021?
I am concerned with the unpredictability of our business, both in every region, in every method, in every level of the business. You know, Europe was incredibly strong in the third quarter, and we had 40% of the stores closed through most of November. 10% of the stores are closed now, and we'll have almost all the stores open, and will have all the stores open in 2 weeks. North America, we don't know how long this is going to continue. Will we have shutdowns here? And Asia has pockets of resurgence, predominantly Japan and Korea. So there's a level of unpredictability in the business. And then add to that this huge acceleration in a move to digital, away from brick and mortar. Different players in the ecosystem, like the pure players, the Zalandos, the Amazons, the Tmals, who are doing exceptionally well. Some of the big box stores not doing well across the globe. So it's just really difficult to predict, really difficult to model. I think we're going to all have to be exceptionally nimble. And I think it's also creating an environment where we want to do with less. Everybody here is trying to figure out how to scramble, not buy product that doesn't sell, buy less and do less and sell in less, but still maintaining your presence and being able to get back into product faster. So there's just a lot going on. We've seen so many different changes. The idea of video conferencing is something, you know, you may find this hard to believe, but I didn't do many of these before March when we all were sent home. We're now 9 to 5. At least everybody's on these videos every moment of every day. It's crazy. So
Indeed.
Changing fast. And, you know, we don't talk about it, but we're not traveling. It's an amazing thing. We've really eliminated travel in a global company. I'm sure it'll come back, but I don't think it'll ever be the same. Space needs won't be the same. How we evolve, the consumer demanding more product that's more acceptable, product that's more socially responsible. It's just been a chaotic, crazy world. Political turmoil. It's just been, what else? I mean, we also have a CEO transition. So I think you guys know my CEO, Manny Chirico, who's run the company for 25 years. He's been an incredible leader on the CR front, really put the company forward. And to be successful at CR, you have to have it come from the top. It has to start there. He's absolutely been the driver for what this company believes in and doing the right thing. And he's stepping down, and Stefan is right behind him with the same values. So just a lot of change and a lot of craziness.
But I understand that the commitment to innovation and sustainability will remain top of the agenda also with the new CEO.
Absolutely. Stefan, myself have the same values that Manny had, and I don't see changes. Yeah. Just the person, but not the values.
That's great to hear. Thank you. There is one question that actually now it's getting more and more, but I want to start with one that is around, you mentioned earlier that the ESG thinking is more prevalent in Europe than in the US. Why do you think that is the case? Why do you think that ESG and impact is more important and visible in Europe than in the US?
So I go two ways, two answers. One is I believe Europe has historically had a longer term view of payback. The US is quarter by quarter, maybe you get year by year. European investing has tended to have a longer horizon. So that's piece one. Piece two is I do believe Europe has been at the front of the curve on the issues around sustainability, recycling. It's just been a little bit ahead. It's been ahead of the US. So I think the investor, the consumer has pushed harder to include it in their models and their returns.
Yeah, thank you. Here's one from James Crowley. How do you think supply chain planning and forecasting can help sustainability and reduction of impact for PVH and other large brands? So avoiding air travel, avoiding overstock.
All the above. I mean, we are struggling with the concept of planning. It's something that we're going to put a lot. We've always had a focus on planning. We are going to get better at it. We're going to become more predictive, but being nimble and not only planning correctly, because you can plan. Always planning will help you. Will always eliminate, hopefully, risk. It will eliminate excess. It has to be better than just throwing everything against the wall. So we believe planning is a key, but also being nimble is going to be key. None of us really saw the significant increases that digital would have this year. And being able to move goods from store to consumer or our own warehouse to consumer, being able to move goods to a wholesale account, to the third party e-commerce fulfillment rather than stores. Just being more nimble is going to have to be one of our areas of focus, because I don't believe it's only about the planning. I think in addition to being nimble, being better planners, maybe buying less. I think next year is going to be more about not going after the last sale, but maybe going after the gross margin. So maybe buying less, higher gross margins. I do believe we are also going to see planning impact. As much as planning is key, it's also about speed. I think we want to focus on speed and be able to plan later in the cycles, have more facts, have more sell-through information, understand consumer trends, understand channel trends as it relates to e-com versus brick and mortar. So getting the speed in the process so that we can plan later and read better what's going on in the business is key for us, and a focus.
Yeah. And then I'm watching the time. I think this will be our last question, but it's a very visionary or forward-looking question, at least. How do you see the PVH brands working in the next 5 to 10 years? So really interested regarding the business models that you've talked about that are changing. That's what the question is about. It just came in.
So I guess if I look at our different regions and our different channels, I don't see brick and mortar. We don't see brick and mortar going away. We do see the acceleration in digital or online business continuing. We think there's more unified commerce. There's just anybody buying product being available at any channel is got to be key. And at this point, it's becoming a price of just doing business. I think our brands will continue to evolve and look very, very hard at what the consumer demands. So, one thing that I think we could do a better job of, and it's a major focus for us, is listening to the consumer. What do they want? Where do they want it? What's important to them? And how to deliver that product the way they want it delivered. So we're listening more to the consumer to really understand how to evolve the business rather than making decisions without the consumers without the consumer in mind.
Yeah, and we're expecting this consumer to demand more and more sustainability and transparency in the product.
We absolutely agree.
Yeah. Well, Mike, it was such a pleasure to have you here, at least virtually. Hopefully one day you can also come visit us here in Amsterdam.
I would love to.
I should say, normally this would be an event where the whole building would be buzzing. And there's one thing that is a bit of a downside of the, not traveling, all virtual side of things. If you work in innovation and innovators with brands and manufacturers, there is an element of trust and relationship that is being created when you meet in person. So, and that is crucial for innovation to really march forward. So we're hopefully finding a balance that enables us to have a little bit of physical events again in the future.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I miss the element of being in an office and being with people. It's different. It's different and difficult. So looking forward to being in person.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.